Hey there! Today I'm going to share with you just how I do a book cover painting assignment from the initial email from the publishing company through the pencils right through to the finished painting that then gets photographed and sent to the client, as well as all my thoughts as to what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and even some things to consider if, or rather when, you get that email asking you to do a cover of your own. Unless I get distracted and decide to play with Boo the Wonder Cat here. Hey Boo, you want to play? Come on, let's go get twisty. Come on. Oh, good girl. There you go. Hey there, fellow art lovers. Welcome back to the studio. I appreciate you stopping by. I sure do. Like I said in the teaser, today we're going to do the cover art for this book assignment. This was the paperback and this was the recorded book version. Now, before I get into the nuts and the bolts of this job, if you just want to watch the painting part and you're not interested into what goes into a book cover assignment, well, that's cool. I put a timestamp link down in the description area of the video, so you can go on and skip ahead. But I think it's worth watching if you're at all interested in the behind the scenes process. This was the third book cover of 6 that I did for this Ralph Compton Trail Drive series. Now, Ralph died a number of years back, but the publishing house is introducing lots of great Western writers under Mr. Compton's name. It's a practice that's become more and more common over the last number of years. They tap into an audience that recognizes an author's name with a lesser known author writing similar stories under their umbrella. So, what is the process for doing book cover art? Well, I imagine it's different for each artist, and I don't do them all the time anymore since I'm a fine artist and a recovering illustrator. But I imagine it's not too different from any illustration assignment that you're going to get. First, you get a description of the job and are asked for a bid, or you're given a budget and are offered the job if you're interested in doing it. Now, if you get the job, or if you take the job, you'll get a design template that's going to show you where the type goes and where your illustration area is. You need to do your drawing within that parameter. You'll do an initial drawing, also known as a pencil, and when you're done with that, you send it off to the client. They'll have meetings or they'll show it to the higher ups, and they will approve it or they'll make changes. You need to revise the drawings until they're happy with the design of your pencil. Once the drawing's approved, you're going to go on and do the actual painting and send a client a photo of the finished image. They'll do the same thing. They're going to have meetings, show it around. If they have revisions, you'll take care of those until they're happy and don't have any more changes. Then I'll go ahead and photograph and email them a high-resolution image. Let's go over to the desktop and let me show you how this book cover assignment went. Once I decided to take the job, this is the email that they sent with the description. Basically, it's the hero's 27 with straw blonde hair, wears a rancher's clothes, chaps, and a brown Stetson. Now, I made it black because there's just too much damn brown in this painting. He's armed with a rifle and a 6-gun revolver, and he rides just a basic stock quarter horse. He's crouching behind a shot-dead longhorn and using it as cover as he fires at the outlaws trying to steal his herd. After that, I'll find a quiet spot and carefully plan my next move. Let's move along. So once I have the scene worked out in my head, I set about gathering the reference. I decided to make this a morning scene and started with this photo from my backyard. I love the softness of it, where the sun is just breaking up over the hills. And so that is the lighting effect that I went for the whole painting. This is the foreground and middle ground that I used. Of course, I have to change the lighting so that it matches, but that's what I want the ground to look like. And I took and I moved this bush over to the right-hand side there so that it was behind our hero and he would pop off the background from the herd that was back there. And of course, I removed that big lumpy hill back there. And so here is the initial pencil that I did. I did this in 2 pieces parts. This is the background. Everything is placed in here that I want except for our hero, because I'm only doing one version of this. I did 4 versions of him, 2 with a rifle and 2 with a revolver, one where he's crouching and one where he's on his knees but kind of sitting up getting a better shot. So when I put them all together, we got 4 different pencil versions. So here's the first one, here's the second one, here's the first one with the rifle, and then here's the one that they ultimately decided to go with, where he's sitting up getting a better shot with his rifle. So once we get that approved, we can go ahead and do the finished painting. But before we get there, we've got one more thing to cover. So you're probably wondering about the different reference that I used for this. You know, you saw the background, you saw the landscape. Let's take a look at what some of the photo reference that I had to work from. So these are the bad guys here. I did take these photos at the Prescott Rodeo, and since I've done some artwork for the posters for them, I worked it out where I could come in with my camera and photograph during the rodeo. So I take lots of pictures in the warm-up pens, and these were a couple of the pictures that I took. Just added, one of the guys was waving a slicker. Here is the bad guy that's riding up. I took this photo at a photo shoot. I always try and get action shots because they can come in really handy. So this is the guy, and then here I am in my backyard. And this was just before the SWAT team arrived, because my neighbor called and reported a guy waving a gun around in the backyard. Nah, I'm just kidding. In Arizona, everybody carries a gun. And I'm going to be replacing just basically, you know, his head with the wild rag covering up his face, and then holding up his revolver riding towards the good guy. So here's the shots that I used for photo reference, and my wife took these. I did take some photos of another guy, but I really like these ones better. You'll notice that as I'm shooting the rifle, I'm left-handed, and I'm right-handed when I'm shooting the revolver. It just works best for the painting. I've started the background here. I've laid in very lightly the sky, and I'm starting to put in those far distant hills. The hills and the sky in this painting are so important because it carries through the rest of the painting. And so on this particular painting, since this lighting is so important, I'll put that in first and work my way forward. And remember, if you don't get that feeling of light now, you're not going to have it in the future. So make sure that you get the values and the colors and the temperatures as right as you can. Hey everybody, welcome back. Okay, I've taken it to a little bit farther just to be able to show you. I mean, basically I laid it all in real quickly. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on this area here where the cowboy and the dead longhorn are positioned, and I'm going to go ahead and lay that in. I'm going to rough it in. Not going to spend a whole lot of time putting details in on it because, as I've said before, it really is just a waste of your time until you get everything laid in. I have a pretty good feeling as to how much detail I want to go in on these things, and so I'll bring it about as far as I think I should, but don't go crazy with the detail now. Hold off on it, see how everything's working. You may find that you've got plenty of detail in there. So anyways, let's go ahead and get going on this. Now we're going to get to the fun part. I mean, this is the part that you've been working for. He is obviously the focal point. So I go ahead and I lay in the darkest dark on him. Start with his black hat. And I will go in and kind of put everything in roughly as far as I can. Try and get the lights, keep the lights separate from the darks. I always say that. And you can blur them together as you need to. But just make sure that you know where your lights are, where your darks are, and you'll be fine. This is where all that preparation that you've done with getting your reference is really going to pay off, because you've got a great photo reference to work from You may need to change colors a bit, things like that. That's easy. But when you put in your darks, you put it in as kind of your middle value, knowing that you can go in and put your darks into that. But at this point, just remember, keep your lights and your darks separate. And here's something that's really going to help you. The lightest areas in your shadow areas are never as light as the darkest areas in your lights. Let me just say that again because it's so important. The areas in your shadows that are the lightest are never as light as the darkest areas in your lights. If you keep that in mind, that will keep them separate and you'll never go too far wrong. So all areas that are out of direct light are going to be darker than any of your areas that are in direct light, even as it's turning away from the light. I do hope that makes sense to you. If you have any questions about it, just put them down in the comments section and I'll do my best to answer them for you. Notice I'm not getting lost on the sleeve detail there. I've simplified it quite a bit. I do have some reflected light there. You can see the brown area that's reflecting up onto the underside of his arm. That helps with that idea that there's a lot of light bouncing around, but it's not real bright. And then when I handle the transition between the light and the dark areas here on his vest, I just keep those nice and soft, but don't go into it too much. Just a little bit goes a long way. Now moving on to the mounted cattle rustler. For the horse and rider, as always, I start with the darks and paint dark to light. In order to accurately paint the light, you have to have the darks to judge it by. I'm not thinning down the paint much at all, just a little dab of Gamsol or odorless mineral spirits, and I only apply as much as I need to cover the shadows. At this point, I'm only concerned with getting the values right. What are the values? I hear some of you asking under your breath. I hear you. Yes, I do. I hear all. Values are simply how light or how dark something is in your picture. It has nothing to do with the color or the color temperature. It's just the lightness or darkness of something. Now in this channel, one of the things I like to talk about that makes me a little bit different from the other art channels out here in YouTube land. Yes, that is a shameless plug. Hit the like button, subscribe, and ring that bell to get notifications of when I upload new content, and to give an artist their wings. Anyways, one of the things I like to talk about is the business side of art. So let's say that you get that email asking if you'd like to do a book cover painting for them. It can be done traditionally like this one, or digitally.
You gotta tell me it don't make any difference. For heaven's sake.
Okay, it don't make any difference if you do it digitally or traditionally. Here's a couple of scenarios where you might want to think about turning them down. The first email goes something like this. Dear starving artist, we at Skinflint Publishing are always looking for new artist talent to create cover art. And since we're so wonderful and you're just starting out and need us, well, we'd like to give you the honor of creating cover art for us for little to no pay. I call this the record company approach because it's kind of what record companies do to young bands just starting out and hungry. So no matter how much you want the job, don't do any work for free. Or don't do any work where they say, if we like it, we'll pay you. Never do work for hire. It cheapens your value and tells them more about you than you want them to know. If they want you, if they really want you, they'll pay for you. And this is true not just for book cover assignments. This is true for any illustration assignment that you're offered. Another reason to walk away from doing a job, and this sometimes only becomes apparent when you're knee-deep into the job, but you can get better at spotting it if the email directions are overly specific. But once you find that the designer or publisher is over-the-top picky in their directions, the kind of details that make no difference to anyone except for the designer, or if you've already taken the job, do your best to finish it, be professional, and be too busy for that person the next time that they offer you work. When you do one of these jobs that you're overly directed, you don't do your best work. It ends up tending to be rather stale. So it's sometimes better just to not get involved with it from the beginning. So if you've got alarm bells going off in your head that this guy's going to be trouble, you probably should listen to that. I can't tell you the number of jobs where I look back on it and say, yep, all the signs were there. This last one I call the kitchen sinker. Dear Mr. Van Gogh, we at Medieval Madness Publishing love your work, and we saw a cartoon you did on Instagram of a pig dressed in a knight's armor, and think you'd be perfect for our Throne Games book series. We have $200 in the budget and would like a photorealistic battle scene where two of the houses are fighting each other. The first house has 10,000 men and are outnumbered by the second house that has 50,000 men. About half are mounted on their war horses, while the back rows are archers. I sure hope your spidey sense is tingling on this one and just telling you to run away. And this particular one has two problems. One is the ridiculous amount of work you have to do for $200. And the second is you're not the right person for this assignment. If you do cartoon pigs and they want you to do super realism, walk away. Hey everybody, let me go ahead and talk to you through about, I'm kind of tangled up here in my microphone. Let's talk you through where we are and where we're going. For this painting, the bad guy and the good guy are in. We've got the morning sky, and we've got the rustlers in the background roughed in. I do have a tone on the cattle herd here, but I haven't put in the detail. And you'll notice this yellow down here. There is no paint down here yet. And rather than spend a lot of time on this cattle, which is going to be covered up in dust, I want to get everything else laid in before I go in and spend time on them, because there's a real fine line between them being too prominent and being too knocked back. So in order to be able to judge that, I'm going to go ahead and put in all of the foreground now. This is a really good shot here to show how I do an area like this. I will start with a big brush, tone down some burnt sienna, and then I mix some green into that variation. I'll go back in. This is where the underpainting color really comes through. Wipe some of that away, and then I'll go over it with a soft brush to help soften some of that up. And I'll work this until I feel like I've got that lead in that I want. There's a little bit of a path that you'll see as we go along, and that helps to lead your eye in. Now, you're not going to see this on the book cover, but I'm retaining the painting so that I can go ahead and offer it for sale in the gallery, and it has to read like it's a completed painting. So once I get that general area filled in, then I start putting in more of the details. This scrub grass is created going back and forth between the burnt sienna and the green mixture. The values are very close, but the colors are different. I make sure not to put in anything that's way too dark. I can lead the eye in exactly as I want it with a little bit of that trail there. As I get towards the end, then you start adding in a little bit of the individual grasses. You really don't need too much. Just a few around the longhorn where the focal point is, and let everything else just kind of fade away. And not to ignore that poor longhorn. Geez, what do I say about him? He looks delicious. I mean, you can't make him look pathetic. You can't have blood all over him. You need to make it clear that this longhorn didn't make it, and that he's using the cow to hide behind. Not that that's going to be a very good way to stop a bullet, but hey, you use what you got. I mean, it's either the longhorn or that bush behind him. Yeah, I'd pick the longhorn too. One thing that I will call out about the painting here on the longhorn is you'll notice in the shadow areas, and the dark browns. I also have some grays in there. That helps to kind of vibrate the colors and makes it more believable for your eye. When you have warms and cools playing off of each other that are close in value, you're going to have a much easier time believing that there's light bouncing in there, because what's happening is we've got some sky that's kind of reflecting down onto the shadow areas. So now we're just cleaning it up, putting in the finishing touches, making sure that the background doesn't pop forward too much, softening edges. That's really important when you get back there. You definitely don't want any hard edges that's going to bring your eye back into that area. And then just selectively going in and adding a few darker bushes here and there. Coming down the home stretch on the rest of the painting, putting in these finishing touches, now I can go in and I can get those cattle put in just the way we want them. Not too light, not too dark. Don't put a whole lot of detail, enough in order for you to tell what's going on. And really this is kind of a juggling act. You'll put it down, put in some details here and there, and then once that dries, I would go over the top of it and I would scumble over some of the dust. And if I put too much down, then I wipe a little bit away. But you don't want a whole lot of detail in there, but you want just enough so that you know, yep, that's a herd of cattle that's being scattered and led away. And when I finish that, this is what we end up with. Well, that's about it, art lovers. I do appreciate you showing up, and man, if you stuck to the end, you give yourself a gold star. I hope you found some of this information useful, and as always, I'll see you down the road.